They say a week before your wedding is the most stressful, but for me, it was supposed to be filled with anticipation. Final fittings, venue checks, last-minute seating chart adjustments. I had it all lined up. My name is Ethan Taylor, and I was about to marry the woman I believed was my soulmate, Hannah. We had been together for 5 years, through ups and downs, and I thought we were unbreakable. That Monday, she sat me down at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she played with the ring on her finger. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I need a few days to think," she said quietly. "I booked a room at the Silverwood Inn. I don't know if I'm ready." It hit me like a brick to the chest. "You're not ready? Hannah, it's in 7 days. The dress is hanging in the closet. The flowers are ordered. My mom is flying in tomorrow. I just need space, Ethan. Please." At the time, I blamed myself. Maybe I had been too obsessed with work lately. Maybe I hadn't shown her enough affection. I agreed. I told her I understood. I packed her bags into the trunk and watched her drive away. But something didn't sit right. I didn't know it yet, but my world was already unraveling. The first night without Hannah was unbearable. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation from the past month. Something about her sudden withdrawal felt staged. This wasn't cold feet. It was too calculated, too clean. The next morning, I made coffee and found her tablet on the counter. She never left without it. It buzzed with a notification, a hotel reservation confirmation. Silverwood Inn, room 514. 2 guests. 2. I froze. My stomach dropped. I clicked deeper into the email. It was a package for a romantic getaway. Rose petals, champagne, spa treatment for 2. My hands trembled. I told myself it could have been a mistake. Maybe she booked for herself and a friend, her cousin Jamie. Maybe. But I knew better. I drove to the hotel. The clerk didn't even blink when I said I was there to surprise my fiancée in room 514. He handed me the spare key like he'd done it 1,000 times. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode through my ribs. I didn't knock. I opened the door slowly, just enough to see. There they were, her bare back against the sheets, and a man's arm draped around her waist. I didn't recognize him. Not yet. I just backed away, closed the door, and walked down the hall. Silent. Cold. Empty. It wasn't until later that day that I realized who he was. Scott Parker. My boss. Scott Parker. The name echoed in my skull like a hammer against glass. He wasn't just any boss. He was my boss. My mentor. The man who gave me a shot fresh out of college, who vouched for me when I applied for my promotion. We'd had beers together. He'd invited Hannah and me to his house for barbecues. His wife, Loretta, had even helped Hannah plan parts of our wedding. It made me sick. I sat in my car outside the Silverwood Inn for what felt like hours. Watching, thinking, drowning in a storm of disbelief and rage. I wanted to storm back in and rip the sheets off the bed, scream, cry, fight. But I didn't. Instead, I drove away. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the engagement ring sitting in its little velvet box. The same ring I had worked overtime for months to afford. The ring that had symbolized forever, now just a glittering lie. The next morning, I didn't go into the office. I called in sick. I couldn't bear to look Scott in the eyes. I couldn't even bear to hear Hannah's voice. But I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, she came home. Hair perfect. Nails done. Spa glow. She smiled weakly at me like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't shattered everything. "I just needed to clear my head," she said softly. "I know it's confusing." I played along. I didn't mention the hotel. I didn't mention room 514. I let her talk. Because I needed to know how deep this betrayal went. I was done being the fool. I watched Hannah like a hawk that night. Every word she spoke, every movement she made. I studied her with a clarity I never had before. The blind love I once had was gone. What replaced it was cold calculation. Pain sharpens you in ways comfort never can. She talked about needing space, about how weddings change people, how she felt pressured by everyone's expectations. I nodded at all the right times, offered her tea, and let her think I was the same man she left behind 2 days ago. But I wasn't. While she showered, I did what I once swore I'd never do. I looked through her phone. She'd changed the password, of course. But old habits die hard. Her birthday, our anniversary. Second try. I was in. There were no texts from Scott. Not one. But she had deleted almost every thread from the past 2 weeks. Photos too. Except for one backup she forgot to clear from her recently deleted folder. Just one blurred selfie of her in a hotel mirror and his unmistakable reflection behind her. Scott Parker, shirtless, holding a champagne glass. My heart burned in my chest. Not from heartbreak. I was past that. Now, I wanted the truth. All of it. The next day, I returned to the office for the first time since the romantic getaway. I walked past Scott's glass office. He looked up, gave me a casual wave and a forced smile, as if nothing happened. I smiled back, because I had a plan now. That evening, I confronted Hannah. I know who it was, I said, keeping my voice steady. Room 514. Silverwood Inn. Her face went pale. She didn't deny it. Instead, she broke into sobs, loud, guilt-ridden, theatrical sobs. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was one mistake. I didn't think you'd find out. One mistake? You spent 3 nights with him. Silence. She wiped her face, looked up at me, and whispered, "Please, let's not throw this away. We can still get married." I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. My voice was ice. "We're not getting married, Hannah. Not now. Maybe not ever." She didn't fight back. Not really. I think part of her already knew this was coming. But none of us, not her, not me, could have predicted what would happen next. Scott Parker was about to die. 2 days after the confrontation, I was still sleeping on the couch. Hannah stayed in the bedroom, occasionally sobbing loud enough to make sure I could hear. I didn't respond. I couldn't even look at her without seeing his face, his hands on her, his smug smile from that damn mirror. I was halfway through drafting a resignation letter when my phone buzzed. Scott Parker found dead in his home early this morning. Suspected domestic disturbance. Investigation ongoing. I read the line 3 times, stunned. My ears rang. My vision blurred. The article was thin on details. It had just been published. All it said was that he died sometime between 2 and 5 a.m., and authorities were questioning a close family member. It didn't say who. I showed Hannah the article. Her mouth dropped open. For once, she looked genuinely shocked. "Do you think?" "Loretta?" she whispered. "Loretta. Scott's wife. The same Loretta who hosted us for dinner 3 months ago, who helped Hannah pick flowers, who gave a toast at our engagement party. The same woman who, I now realized, had likely suspected something all along. Maybe she'd just been waiting for confirmation. And maybe she got it." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Jenna, a colleague and mutual friend of both Scott and me. "Ethan, you okay? Have you seen the news?" Loretta turned herself in. I had to read that one twice too. Turned herself in. Everything hit me at once. The betrayal, the lies, the twisted web we were all stuck in. Scott's affair didn't just destroy a relationship. It ended a life. It shattered a woman who had done nothing but love a man who didn't deserve her. It could have been me. If I'd buried the pain deeper, married Hannah anyway, ignored the signs, would I have ended up like Loretta? The grief hit differently now. It was no longer just about heartbreak. It was about the wreckage people leave behind when they cheat, when they lie, when they refuse to take responsibility. And I was still standing in the middle of it. The funeral was private. Closed casket. Barely a dozen people showed up. A few coworkers, a couple of distant relatives, and Loretta's brother, the only one who spoke. Hannah didn't go. I didn't invite her. And honestly, I didn't go for Scott. I went to see the consequences. Loretta didn't show up, of course. She was in a holding facility awaiting psychiatric evaluation. The report said she snapped after finding a second phone, Scott's burner, filled with messages, photos, and hotel receipts. Not just of Hannah. There were others. Multiple women. Multiple betrayals. Hannah was just the latest. That revelation did something strange to me. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt disgusted. Hollow. I thought Hannah had destroyed our love. But the truth was, Scott had destroyed so many people. Loretta. Me. His own future. His legacy. All because he couldn't be faithful. And Hannah had helped him. That night, I finally packed her things. I placed her dress, the one she once called the dress of my dreams, gently into its garment bag and set it on top of her suitcase. She watched me silently, standing in the doorway. "You don't have to do this," she said, barely above a whisper. "We can fix it." I zipped the suitcase. "You made your choice," I replied. "And now I'm making mine." She left that night. No screaming. No theatrics. Just a quiet, broken goodbye and a taxi pulling out of our driveway. And just like that, the woman I thought I'd spend forever with became a chapter one couldn't wait to finish. But the story wasn't over. Because healing, that's its own journey. And mine had just begun. After Hannah left, the house felt wrong. Like a museum of a life that no longer existed. The wedding invitations were still in a box near the door, unopened. Her perfume still lingered in the bathroom. Our photos, once framed on the walls, now felt like crime scenes. I couldn't bring myself to take them down yet. It was like removing them would make everything too real, too final. I worked from home for a while. I told HR I needed time after Scott's death. They agreed, a little too quickly. I think the rumors had already started. Some people whispered about Scott and Hannah. Some looked at me with pity, others with silent judgment. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt the tension. I didn't care. I was done pretending. For a while, I filled the silence with noise, podcasts, music, meaningless YouTube rabbit holes. But none of it helped. The betrayal wasn't just in what they did. It was in how easily they did it. How she smiled when she lied. How he patted me on the back like a brother while planning to stab me in the heart. I started seeing a therapist. At first, I hated it. Sitting there, answering questions about my childhood, about trust, about love. But after a few sessions, I started unraveling something I hadn't even realized. I had built my whole identity around being the good guy, the dependable one, the fixer, the one people leaned on. And because of that, I ignored red flags. I excused warning signs. I allowed myself to be the victim, thinking that suffering quietly was somehow noble. It wasn't. It was survival. But I didn't want to survive anymore. I wanted to live. So, I started over. Little by little. New routines. New gym. Different grocery store. I even painted the living room. A stupid, small thing, but it felt like mine again. And that's when she walked into my life. Not Hannah. Sophia. But that's a story worth telling on its own. I met Sophia on a random Thursday evening. I wasn't looking for anything, definitely not love. I was just grabbing a coffee at a bookstore cafe, trying to escape the four walls that reminded me of everything I'd lost. She was sitting at the corner table, typing furiously on her laptop, earbuds in, brow furrowed in concentration. Then her coffee spilled. A domino effect. Her elbow knocked it, it splashed across the table, and her laptop screen flickered. I was the only one nearby. I grabbed a bunch of napkins and walked over without thinking. "You okay?" I asked. She yanked out an earbud and sighed, half laughing. I guess caffeine and productivity don't mix. We cleaned up the mess, exchanged a few jokes, and somehow ended up talking for an hour. Then two. It was the first real conversation I'd had in weeks that didn't feel like I had to fake a single word. She wasn't just kind. She was real, grounded, thoughtful. When I finally told her I was supposed to get married a month ago, she didn't flinch or pity me. She just nodded and said, "You must be carrying a lot." That one sentence broke something open in me. We didn't exchange numbers that night. But the next week, she was there again. Same corner table, this time with a new coffee and a wary eye on it. I bought her a lid. And that's how it started. Not with fireworks. Not with butterflies. But with safety. With someone who didn't need to fill the silence with lies. With someone who made me feel like I could breathe again. But as we grew closer, part of me feared that I was rushing into something just to numb the past. Was I using Sophia as a rebound? Was I healed enough to deserve someone like her? I didn't know then, but I was about to find out. Things with Sophia progressed slowly, intentionally. We went on walks instead of dinners. We shared stories instead of secrets. She didn't press, and I didn't pretend. It felt peaceful, like a calm sea after a violent storm. But as I began building something new, the past came clawing back. It started with a text from an unknown number. "Do you ever think about what we lost?" I stared at it for minutes before deleting it. Then came another. "I miss you, Ethan. I messed up. I know that now." Hannah. She had vanished after moving out. No calls, no emails. I figured she had enough shame to at least stay gone. But I underestimated her need for redemption. Or maybe it was guilt. Maybe she wanted to rewrite the ending. She started showing up at places I used to go, the gym, the grocery store, even the parking lot of my apartment complex once. Always by accident. Always acting surprised. But I knew better. The final straw came when she sent me a photo of our old wedding bands on her palm with the caption, "Still believe we had something real?" That night, I told Sophia everything. About the cheating, the hotel, my boss, Scott's death, Loretta, all of it. She listened, didn't interrupt. No judgment, just held my hand and said, "Thank you for trusting me." That moment, that simple act of being heard, healed a piece of me I didn't know was still broken. And after that night, Hannah's messages stopped. Maybe she finally understood. I wasn't hers to guilt anymore. I had found something she never gave me. Peace. A few weeks after telling Sophia everything, I found myself digging through a box in my closet. Old memories. Torn pieces of a life that felt like someone else's. Wedding plans. Photos. Her handwriting on sticky notes. Don't forget the cake tasting at 2. I didn't cry. Not anymore. But my chest tightened like someone had tied a rope around my ribs and kept pulling. At the bottom of the box, folded carefully between 2 blank thank you cards, was a letter I'd started writing to Hannah the night after I found out about Scott. I had forgotten about it completely. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was raw. Hannah, right now, you're asleep next to a man who pretends to admire me. And I'm sitting in the car outside that hotel, wondering how I became the punchline to a story I didn't even know was being told. I want to hate you. I really do. But I can't. Because part of me still remembers the way you looked at me on the beach in Charleston when we talked about names for our kids. I think that's the cruelest part of betrayal. Not the act itself, but the realization that everything you thought was real might have been an illusion. If you ever read this, just know, you didn't just cheat on me. You ended the man I used to be. But maybe, in some strange way, that's a gift. Because now I get to choose who I become. Ethan asterisk. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. Reading it again, I realized something. I was no longer that man sitting in his car, broken and blind. I was someone new. Someone healing. Someone learning to live for himself. Sophia wasn't a distraction. She was a mirror. She didn't fill a void. She reminded me that the void didn't define me. I took the letter, lit it, and dropped it in the sink. Some stories don't need to be finished. Some just need to be burned. There's a quiet that comes after pain. Not the kind that echoes, the kind that settles. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't waking up with my chest tight or my jaw clenched. I was waking up next to Sophia, her hair a mess, her breathing slow, her warmth real. And I felt okay. Not euphoric. Not blinded by new love. Just okay. One evening, we sat on her balcony, drinking tea and watching the city lights blur beneath the mist. She turned to me and asked, "Do you think we ever really get over betrayal? Or do we just grow around it?" I thought about it. It's like a tree that gets struck by lightning, I said. It'll never be the same, but it keeps growing. Just with a scar in the middle. She smiled at that. Sophia never tried to fix me, and that's what made her so different. She let me take my time. She didn't treat my past like baggage, but like a map, a messy, painful one, of how I got to her. Eventually, I started going back to the office. My old job had been reassigned, and with Scott gone, a lot of the structure had changed. No one asked too many questions. Everyone just moved on. Funny how workplaces do that, like lives aren't falling apart behind polite emails and coffee breaks. I wasn't mad about it anymore. I didn't need justice. What I needed was to release it all, let it float into the past, where it belonged. I even got an email from Loretta's attorney one day. She wanted to apologize, through a letter. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for hours before finally tearing it open. It was short, honest, painful. "Ethan, I know my actions were unforgivable. I'm not proud of what I did. But I need you to know that I never hated you. I hated the lie I was living. And when I found out the truth, I didn't just lose my husband. I lost myself. I hope you find peace. I hope you find love again. And I hope it's the kind that never makes you doubt your worth. Loretta." And with that, another weight lifted. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself. One Saturday afternoon, Sophia and I took a walk through Central Park. The kind of lazy, aimless walk that you only take when time no longer feels like something to beat. We stopped at a quiet bench near the lake, and I realized I hadn't been there in almost a year, not since I had brought Hannah here to practice our vows. Funny how places hold memories like fingerprints. Sophia was telling me about a dream she'd had, something about flying and forgetting how to land, when I pulled something out of my jacket pocket. It was the ring, the one I had meant for Hannah, the one I couldn't bear to look at for months. I placed it in Sophia's hand without a word. She looked down at it, then at me. No panic, no assumptions. "Are you asking?" she said softly. I shook my head. "Not yet." I took a breath. I just needed someone to see it. Someone who could understand what it was meant to be and what it could be again. Someday. She nodded slowly, closed her fingers over the ring, and handed it back. "I get it," she said. "And when, or if, you ever are ready, don't make it about the ring. Make it about the choice." That moment wasn't a proposal. It wasn't even a promise. It was something better, permission to hope again. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking, talking about nothing, laughing about pigeons chasing toddlers, watching boats glide across the water. And I realized, I wasn't waiting to be healed anymore. I was already healing. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to stop surviving and start living. A few weeks later, I stood alone on the rooftop of my apartment building, looking out over the skyline as the sun dipped behind the buildings. In one hand, I held a small notebook, the same one I had used to write my vows before the wedding that never happened. The pages were stained, the ink smudged from tears that belonged to another version of me. But I didn't open to the old pages. Instead, I turned to a blank one, and I started writing new vows. Not for Sophia. Not yet. These were for me. I vow to never let someone else's choices define my worth. I vow to listen to my gut, even when my heart wants to believe otherwise. I vow to love with eyes open, not blind. I vow to never again shrink myself to be worthy of love, because real love doesn't require shrinking. I vow to forgive, not to excuse, but to free myself. And I vow to never forget that even after betrayal, grief, and fire, I'm still here, still standing. I closed the notebook and exhaled, feeling something shift inside me. Not closure, exactly, but clarity. Downstairs, Sophia waited, curled up on my couch with tea and her ever-present laptop. I could hear the soft hum of jazz from my living room speaker drifting upward with the breeze. The world didn't pause when my heart broke, but it did offer me a second chance, one I never saw coming. I was no longer the man waiting at the altar. I was the man who walked away from it and built something better on the ashes. It's been a year now. A year since the wedding that wasn't. Since the hotel room. Since the funeral. Since the betrayal that shattered who I thought I was. A year since I stood in the rubble of a future I never got to live. And I'm thankful for all of it. No, not because it didn't hurt, it broke me. But because sometimes, the only way to truly rebuild is to tear everything down first. Hannah moved out of state. Last I heard, she was in therapy, trying to make peace with the damage she helped cause. I don't hate her anymore. I don't love her either. She's just someone I used to know. Loretta was sentenced to 10 years, but eligible for parole in 5. She wrote me again. I didn't respond. Not out of malice, but because some chapters need to stay closed. And Sophia? We're still together. Still growing. Still taking it slow, because this time, I know love isn't about rushing toward a ceremony. It's about walking beside someone who makes you feel seen, steady, and safe. We take each day as it comes. No pressure. Just presence. And me? I've learned that healing doesn't mean going back to who you were. It means honoring who you've become. Don't chase the person who broke you. Don't beg for closure from someone who gave you chaos. Don't hold on to a future that was never real. Sometimes, the greatest love story is the one you write for yourself. So if you're standing in the ruins, wondering how to start again, start with this. You're still here. And that means everything. If this story moved you even a little, please consider liking the video and subscribing. There are more stories of growth, betrayal, and healing to come, and you won't want to miss them.